I am a human being and I kill humans.
Before I knew it, I'd fired 4 shots at the door. I kept on shouting for Eva to phone the police.
Tests are underway to determine if a serial killer is on the loose in Centurion, Pretoria.
The dead won't bother you. It's the living you gotta worry about.
Good evening, YouTube and the rest of the world and all you true crime fans out there, and welcome to another edition of Profiler Africa. In a country where 83 people are murdered every day, the grim statistics often overshadow the complex human stories and the systemic cracks beneath the surface of crime. Tonight, as always, I'm joined by Africa's leading forensic psychologist, Gerard Labuschagne, former head of the forensic psychology section at SAPS. Gerard, great to have you. Before we get into tonight's discussion, if you would like to subscribe to the channel, if you enjoy what we do, please do subscribe right now. Hitting that bell icon also ensures you get notified every time we drop a new episode, so you never miss out on any of our engaging conversations. Want to go deeper and support independent media? Consider becoming a member of the channel. For a small monthly contribution, you'll help us keep the lights on and continue our crucial work. Plus, you get exclusive perks like early access to content and even uncut interviews. Just click the join button below this video. The link is also in the explainer. And we do actually have a little surprise for our members that we'll tell you about a little bit later on. You can also support the show. We got a new one this week, guys, by buying us a coffee. It's cold in Canada and it's cold in Joburg right now. So if you'd like to contribute, you can. When you see that guy pop up, there's our the URL that takes you to our Buy Me a Coffee page, or you can just scan the QR code here. I'll leave it up for a few moments. If you'd like to contribute to the show, please do so. Every contribution makes a huge difference. And then if you've got any ideas for future episodes, questions for Gerard, or perhaps you're interested in sponsoring or contributing to the show, drop us an email at profilerafricainfo@gmail.com. That's profilerafricainfo@gmail.com. There it is. Please do drop us a mail. Anything you'd like to ask or say, questions, comments, feel free to get in touch. Okay, Gerard, hi. Today we're taking a deep dive then into a tragic case from 2011, the Rosebank Police Station shooting, a case that really shook Johannesburg. But before we get into the specifics of that historic case, I wanted to quickly touch on some stuff that's been in the news this week, which is very much aligned to an ongoing conversation that we have really about the kind of state of the justice system here in South Africa. And it's concerning developments that highlight, the ongoing issues within our policing and criminal justice system. Just this week, as you're aware, our KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Police Commissioner held a briefing making some truly explosive claims. They're not just allegations, they're deeply unsettling revelations about corruption and interference at what appears to be very high levels. The commissioner detailed how a specialized task team originally set up to tackle political killings in KwaZulu-Natal was disbanded after they stumbled upon a major organized crime syndicate in Gauteng. And the implications of what they uncovered are frankly astounding. And it's going to be interesting to get Gerard's comments here. So let's take a look at this first, guys.
And I can confirm before the South Africans today that the investigation which these members were involved with in Gauteng has unmasked the syndicate. And this syndicate involves, amongst others, politicians who are currently serving in Parliament. The law enforcement officers include the members of the South African Police Service, the Metro Police, and Correctional Services. They include prosecutors in Gauteng province, the judiciary, and all these are controlled by the drug cartel as well as business people in that province of Gauteng. This act, of course, undermines the criminal justice system in this country.
Okay, so some pretty serious allegations from that briefing, Gerard. The commissioner's talking about politicians currently serving in Parliament, law enforcement officers, prosecutors, the judiciary, all controlled by a drug cartel. First of all, I know you know a little bit. You can give us a little bit of background on the commissioner himself, who's certainly an interesting guy. And then what's your take here, Gerard?
Yeah, firstly, who is this guy, and why is he wearing camouflage?
Yes.
So, General Konazi was actually, for many years, the head of the Police's Special Task Force. Now, for those of you that don't know, this Police's Special Task Force, it's more than a SWAT team. The Special Task Force is actually trained along the lines of the British SAS military special forces. You know, they do everything from urban warfare training to rural warfare training to hostage release to, sniping, parachuting, scuba diving, you name it. I mean, these are incredibly highly trained people. And as I said, Konazi was ahead of that for many years before he was made the provincial commissioner down in KZN. So that's why he's wearing camouflage. So if you ever see police members wearing camouflage, it means they're part of the Special Task Force, which, like I said, these guys could slot in with the recce's and go fighting wars. That's the level of training and equipment that they have. So highly specialized group of people. And he has a very good reputation. I mean, I knew him little bits, when he was not yet a general, from my work that we used to sometimes do with the task force. And then, good reputation, solid guy. So I think on that sense, taking what he's saying, I think he comes as a credible person. So that's one important thing. Am I surprised at what he's saying? No. I mean, I think it's been widely accepted for a long time that organized crime is the biggest danger to our country. And if you think of it, what were the Guptas? What was state capture? It was selling the country out for the benefit of a small group of people, which is, in a way, you could say was organized crime too. So it's not surprising. I mean, it's maybe a little bit surprising, maybe not. I don't know, that parliamentarians are involved, but, corrupt judges, corrupt prosecutors, corrupt police. I mean, is anybody surprised at that? So I think he's taken quite a risk because, he has obviously gone outside of the police's normal way of dealing with things to go and have this public thing where he's accusing senior people in the police, junior people in the police, etc. I guess he's gambling on that the fact that he's made these statements so public would make him hopefully to some degree untouchable, because if you went after him for any reason now, it would look like retribution against him. So I think very brave that he's doing this. Is it necessary? Hopefully it'll lead to some change. But of course, you don't know how far the rot has gone. What they've looked at and investigated doesn't mean that that's all the bad people out there that they've uncovered in this whole situation. So not good that that's come out, but good that it's come out, from the point of view that hopefully something will change. But, often organized crime gets its grip when the system starts to fall apart. If you had a very honest, good, strong, and also not just good, strong members of the police and government, but when control mechanisms start to slip, when management starts to fall apart, that allows for corrupt things to start to take place on a small scale level, cops just bribing people in the street that they stop, but on a higher level. So it's often a sign of organized crime takes hold when the system starts to fall apart, when you can start to influence it and push it further down the line. So that's not a great sign.
It is like a weed. If you allow it the conditions to grow, it'll just keep on growing and growing until it's out of control. Look, I mean, it's one thing for the likes of you and I to talk about this on suspecting these kinds of issues on a regular basis. It's definitely positive to acknowledge this in the public space, that there's a problem here, and to kind of bring awareness to it. I guess the question is, what do you do to take the next step then? How do you step into an action phase?
I don't know. I'm not surprised they shut down the task team. They shut down the Scorpions because they were getting too close to politicians. So the fact they've shut down this task team that he's referring to, that's not surprising. We have historical precedents for that in South Africa. Yeah. What to do about it? I guess they're hoping that some presidential task team that would have, perhaps more credibility and resources would be investigating this. I don't know. Or would it be the start of our own? Hawks, I suppose, on the one hand, you could say, are the people that should be investigating this. But if the Hawks, to some degree, are implicated in this, and I think I heard some mention of General Labuschagne in the longer version of this, and he's the outgoing head of the Hawks. So if he's implied, and I didn't see the whole interview, so forgive me if I don't know what else has really been mentioned. But if he's implied that Hawks people are involved in it, then the question is, who is going to investigate this? Who? I don't know. They'll have to have some specialized task team of people pulled together specifically for this, or is this going to be the start of the creation of some FBI-like No, I don't know.
It's not going to be us, but we will certainly track the story and continue to talk about it and see where it goes. It's certainly going to be interesting. You know, again, it's positive that we discuss these kinds of things on a fairly regular basis and we bring some light to it. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if we're moving into a phase where we're starting to put together ideas of how we can start to tackle these kinds of issues. But certainly seems very brave, and yeah, hopefully he's the kind of guy that's going to bring some action into the environment as well. So powerful stuff. There's that, you know, it's definitely a stark reminder that there are challenges facing law enforcement. They're complex, they're deeply entrenched, Gerard, as we've always discussed. And while that particular briefing focused on current affairs, it does set a chilling context for our main discussion today. Smooth segue. The Rosebank Police Station shooting in 2011. Yeah. That case too involved internal police dynamics, trust, and the devastating consequences of what can happen when systems start to break down. Yeah. So let's turn our attention back to that tragic day. Before we do that, I'd like to just invite everyone to join the chat. If you have any questions regarding the commissioner's comments or questions or comments for the show, we'll look at those later on in the program. Questions for Gerard or comments, we'll drop those in later. Like I say, repeating myself here, broken record. And yeah, I just wanted to say, join the chat. And I wanted to bring up here because Una here, sorry, it always pops up in the wrong place the first time. So Una here celebrates 5 months of membership. She says to our amazing channel. Thank you, Una. More Unas in the world. That's what we need. Okay, on to tonight's case then, Gerard. We're going to start with why this case is significant, especially considering its occurrence in Rosebank, an area that is not usually associated with this kind of violence.
So, I mean, first, like what kind of violence is it? I mean, this is what we commonly nowadays refer to as an active shooter scenario, taking place in a workplace environment, which is very common for these types of things. They often happen in workplaces, but they've happened in churches, et cetera, et cetera. Now, South Africa hasn't had a lot of active shooters. Now, the ones that we would really talk about as the classic disgruntled person who goes to a particular place to kill a bunch of people, as opposed to these tavern shootings that we saw a couple of years ago, which were really just organized, gangs fighting and taking each other out in a tavern. That's something completely different. But we had back in 1999 in Tempe military base in Bloemfontein, where a lieutenant at the infantry battalion there killed six SANDF members, injured 5 others before killed himself. He was a 28-year-old lieutenant who was unhappy about something to do with some personnel-related issue, HR-related issue. A couple of years later, there was another incident at Tempe military base, not as severe or dangerous. But besides that, we haven't. We had on Strydom Square many years ago in the 80s, Barton Strydom, that many of us might know of him as one of his right-wingers, went onto Strydom Square and racially motivated, just started shooting a bunch of black people. But we don't really have these classic active shooters like you would see regularly sort of in America or sometimes in Europe. So this is one that kind of was like that. It could have been a lot worse. We had beginning of last year at that school, Primrose School in Johannesburg, where a kid had a hit list and took his dad's gun to school and shot the principal. But he had a list of about 10 people on that list of people to shoot. So we've luckily not had a lot of these in South Africa. Now, I'm waiting for a big one to happen, and then everybody's going to be scrambling around. So it's an active shooter case. How do we define that? There's lots of different definitions, but basically it's an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people. So it doesn't matter that only 1 or 2 people were shot. An active shooter is a person who was trying to kill people in a particular location, a particular incident. So that's kind of where this case is relevant. Unique, of course, was that it was at a police station, and one of the people was an admin clerk, who we'll get into in a moment, who had been dismissed. And that's, again, a disgruntled employee workplace violence incident. So at the time in 2011, I remember the case happening. I was in the police, but because it was, the guy died at the scene, we would typically not get involved because there's no investigation in the sense of who done it, and there's not going to be a prosecution of a person. So we had unsolved cases we would focus on. This case really became important for me when I fast forward to 2013, when I started to get into sort of threat assessment and threat management, about identifying things early to prevent something like this or something else tragic happening. So then retrospectively, this case became a lot more important in the same way that Morne Harmse, that guy, the Krugersdorp sword killer, the time wasn't particularly interesting. He was arrested at the scene. Fast forward a couple of years, I'm into threat management, threat assessment. Then I suddenly realized, oh my goodness, that case is actually hugely relevant in terms of this kind of behavior that I really became quite fascinated about now.
Before we get to the perpetrator, Kekana, and set the scene a bit there, let's talk a little bit about we've spoken about some of the challenges at the police. Let's do a little refresher on the structure of the police. So we've got a police station sitting in Rosebank. How does a police station in Rosebank fit into the bigger picture? How does the police structure work in South Africa? A little refresher course for South Africans and for those international viewers that may not be aware of how our police system is put together.
So essentially in South Africa, we only have one law enforcement agency that has the mandate to investigate crime and protect the country, and that is the South African Police Service. So unlike places like the United States, where you'll have your local police department funded by that municipality, then on the state or provincial level, you'd have state police, and then the federal level, you'll have the FBIs, etc., doing federal law enforcement. We just have the South African police that does everything from a stolen cell phone to, counterterrorism investigations. So we're also not bound by jurisdiction. So we'll divide, obviously, the country up into provinces, for managerial purposes, each one with a provincial commissioner, like Nkwazi was the provincial commissioner for KZN. And then you'll have we used to have clusters or districts in the old days. I don't know how much that is happening now, but you'd have then the various police stations. Every part of the country will be covered by a police station. So some police stations area can be quite tiny in an urban area, like Rosebanks. Other police stations might, in the Northern Cape, you're going to cover hundreds of kilometers in that particular police station. So you're a policeman in South Africa, whether you go down to Cape Town or Johannesburg, even if you're based in Bloemfontein, you're always a policeman with police authorities, where in these other jurisdictions like the US, once you leave your little area, you're no longer a member of the police. So this is how it works. So this is Rosebank, which is a very nice area in Johannesburg. It's just sort of bordering Sandton, what else? Parkhurst, Parkview, the sort of parks area. The Rosebank Mall is very popular. It's very popular with tourists. A lot of the Gautrain stops there. I actually, when I moved to Johannesburg, stayed in the street, one street up from the police station. The police station's in Sturdy Avenue, and then one street up is where Bath Avenue, which is where I actually temporarily stayed. So I used to apply for my firearms licenses actually in the very same office where one of these people was shot is actually currently the district firearms officers, which is quite weird. And I knew this, and I don't think he knew that. So it has a very small management area and covers any policing responsibilities for that Rosebank area.
Okay, great. So that's a nice scene setter for the area, for how our system is structured. Let's talk a little bit about the guy. Now, there was a disciplinary incident that kind of was at the root of that. So tell us a little bit about this guy, Kekana. Introduce him to us. And what is it that kind of started this whole story or set the wheels in motion?
So to explain this, in the South African police, you obviously in your office, you have a phone. Now, when you make a phone call, you get a personal code you put in, like 16952, which is Gerard's code, and then you make your phone call. So at the end of the month, you'll get a phone bill with all the phone calls linked to my code 16 what. And that's Gerard's bill, and anything that's not an official phone call, you pay for. Now, two guys who are working there, a guy with the name of Kekana, who's our shooter, and another guy named Sitole, had found someone's code. I think it belonged to a Captain Neelavathie. And they were using this to just make all their personal phone calls. And eventually they figure this out. They confront Kekana and Sitole. They both admit, yes, they were using the code. They thought they could. They didn't think it belonged to anybody. And it was a couple $100 rand, which it was not even, it was like Canadian or US $50 at the most, or $40, even if that much. But they were charged with, I think, theft or fraud. And there was a criminal case against them for that, primarily because it's a breach of trust issue. I mean, you're supposed to be the police, you're supposed to be upholding the law, you're in the admin, and these guys were admin staff, so they weren't members of the South African police, they were civilians working in an admin capacity for the South African police. So that's about October of 2010. So then they get arrested. They then have they make statements admitting their guilt, apologizing. So it's pretty much a slam dunk from a disciplinary process. They go through the disciplinary processes. But before that happens, there's already threats being made to Captain Neilavathie, who was the head of support services, basically the head of HR for that particular police station. Threatening, you mess with my life, you better be careful, you try to be a hero, I'll F you, insulting her as a fake captain, racial insults, etc. That led to a docket of intimidation being opened up, which I saw, and literally there was no investigation done into determining who was the author of those threats. So the kind of
No. Carry on. Carry on.
Get on and on.
No, carry on.
So the disciplinary process goes through. Long story short, eventually, in about July of 2011, the next year, about 6-8 months later, it's found they were guilty, and a dismissal is recommended. I think it's still had to be approved by the provincial commissioner, but that's kind of just a rubber stamp. And 19th of July, Kekana is informed that you're going to be fired. In that process, for some reason, Kekana also was the guy at the police station in charge of the armory. So he had the key to the safe for the police guns. Now, I didn't know that was even possible. I wouldn't recommend that that's a good idea. But that was how it was done. They take the keys back from him and they change the locks. So that was obviously a good thing. Captain Steyn oversaw that. He was one of the crime prevention captains. So literally a couple of days after he's informed of his dismissal, the locks are changed, keys are taken back, the armory is secure. But earlier that year, in about March, when he was still obviously doing his on duty, etc., he had handed in a broken firearm. Sorry, I had a pop up here. Are you still there? Okay.
Yeah, we can still hear you. All good.
A firearm that one of the police members, there was something wrong with it. He'd handed it into the provincial armory for repairs. But this is like March. In other words, a good couple months before the shooting took place, I think on the 1st of August. Now, when the firearm was repaired, the armorer from the provincial office phoned him to say, hey, dude, you got to come get this firearm. It's ready. But he didn't come and pick it up. So now we fast forward to him being dismissed. And the provincial armorer phones him again, obviously not knowing he's been dismissed. Kekana, obviously being an admin officer, would have been using his private cell phone because he wouldn't have been properly given a state cell phone, and phones him and says, hey, my friend, you still haven't come to pick up that firearm. So that was probably, I'm trying to just check, sometime on the 20th, about a month before the incident. Phones him again to come and collect it. About on the morning of the incident, he goes and picks up the firearm. He then goes to the police station and essentially walks into the office of the station commissioner first, shoots her. She doesn't pass away. Right next door to it is the office of Captain Neilavathie. Walks in there, shoots Captain Neilavathie. She unfortunately passes away. Then he goes back into the station commissioner's office, shoots her again, I think 2 times. By that point, Captain Steyn, who had asked a couple minutes earlier if he can go to leave a bit earlier to go and get some medicine from the pharmacy, gets contacted and says there's a shooting taking place. Steyn kind of rushes back to the police station and then enters into the station commissioner's office. The suspect then looks and sees him, and the suspect then basically, Kekana then shoots himself in the head. Okay. Now, it's quite common for these types of active shooters for people to actually end it themselves. Yeah.
We can take a look before we get into that. Should we take a little look through the crime scene photographs and just you can talk us through the scene as really you've just described, and we can talk about what we're looking at here. So let's have a look here. All right. So first of all, we've got, this is the police station then. So again, a nice suburban police station, you know, people coming into...
Nice area, and it's a nice little station. I mean, it's a bit run down like most police stations, but it's a nice little tiny one.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and so we come to crime scene photographs. So here we are at the entrance to the police station.
Yeah, so that's actually, if you go back a second.
Sorry, yeah.
That's if you've come into the what we call the charge office in the old days. Now it's the community service center, and you go off down the left-hand side. There's a door, and now you're beyond the guy with the yellow shirt. There's a guy standing in the background. That's going to be the entrance to the secretary's office that leads to the station commissioner on the left, and that blue window you see on the left is actually where NAIDU's office was.
Okay.
This would be Captain NAIDU's office, which, as I said, now is currently the district firearms officer, Sergeant Ndau. Actually, I know him quite well. Yeah, that blanket there is that silver blanket is covering the body of Captain NAIDU. And she was shot, I think, a total of 4 times, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. That's again Captain... I think it's
Captain NAIDU as well, yeah.
And this, I think, is now the entrance to the station commissioner office. Like, literally, the doors are kind of right next to each other, the one door.
And there's seem to be a couple of entrances into it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the captain's.
Okay, then
I'm not sure we're going to see. Yeah, so
we'll see the other side of the desk. We have covered the suspect. Obviously, a lot of shells were found around the scene.
Yeah, according to the captain, the station commissioner, he fired a lot.
And then here we go. You can see at the bottom of the image here, between the sofa and the desk, then would be our victim.
Suspect, yeah.
Oh, is this suspect? Sorry. Okay.
Yeah. Because remember, Nkiza, the station commissioner, she actually survived. She was shot like 3 or 4 times, but she survived.
Okay.
So that's our suspect who ended his own life.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay. That clarifies it for me. Okay.
Yeah. So obviously it was a police, that's a Z88, which is really a exact copy of the Beretta 92. The parts were actually interchangeable. And we started basically making these under the embargo time period of South Africa's history. We had a very good sort of South African arms manufacturing capability, and they, without Beretta's consent, they literally made exact copies, very good, reliable firearms copies. So when we came back into the world of the global world after apartheid ended, we had to pay Beretta a hell of a lot of money for each and every one of these Z88s that were made.
Okay.
What a brilliant car.
And then I mean, I've just taken a selection here, but there were a lot of just kind of used and unused shells littered around the scene. So that's pretty much that kind of gives folks then a sense of the scene itself.
Yeah. Now, entering the unused cartridges that weren't fired. Now, could there have been a jam? Could there have been something that he's cycling the firearm to eject that round? That's the only way you're going to get a round out of there is if you cycle it yourself manually. Because if the round's gone off, you're only going to have an empty shell casing obviously popping out. So what was going on in that time? I mean, he's an admin clerk, so we don't know how experienced he was with firearms. Also sometimes what happens with those old Z88s, I don't know if you can go back to the firearm, the safety, which modern Berettas they've altered, the safety where you swap it, obviously move it to fire and non-fire, is right at the back of the slide. So if you're not careful, you'll see it there with that little red dot. Yes. So now obviously that means it's on fire. But if you're cocking the firearm by gripping it where those serrations are on the back of the slide, and you pull it back to cock it, very often guys would knock the firearm onto safe. So when you let go of the slide and you pull the trigger's just moving back without doing anything, because the firing pin's moved out the way. So that could be a reason why he would then think this gun's not working, I didn't cycle it, and he would cycle another round instead of realizing he just has to put it back onto fire. So that's a common mistake even cops made. We have to train specifically to not accidentally put our firearms onto a safe when you're cocking them.
Okay, cool. All right. So, I mean, that's the incident as it unfolded. What then happened? Obviously, our suspect has committed suicide there on the scene. What's the kind of immediate outcome? I understand that NAIDU had expressed to her sister concerns in the weeks leading up to the actual incident. Yeah. So was quite fearful and was concerned for her safety in the build-up to the event.
Yes, as you know, there was a statement from her commenting that in that lead-up. Remember, the threatening messages were, I think, already the year before. So, as I said, those hadn't been properly investigated. And the problem is, people often think the solution to your threats is trying to catch the guy who made them. A yes and a no. The problem is with threats. Firstly, you've got to put the effort in to catch the guy. And the cops might have thought this is not particularly serious. We're not going to bother to get a subpoena from the cell phone company and do that effort. This is just threats. It doesn't mean anything. That's the first problem, which it seems like what's happened in this case. Secondly, you're not going to probably get arrested for making threats of this nature. So they'll investigate it, then present it to the prosecutor. And even if you are arrested, I can guarantee you're going to get bail. So you're not taking the person out of circulation. Secondly, even if you're convicted of making threats, you're not going to go to jail. Very unlikely you're going to go to jail for making death threats or threats to harm people or threats to insulting people. So you're not taking someone out of society for any effective period of time. You just added another reason for them to really hate you. So if you're motivated by anger and if you feel like this guy probably felt you screwed my whole life up, I've lost my job, I'm prepared to die, going after you, that investigation is just another thing you're piling onto his shoulders. He's already got a disciplinary investigation. Now you're going to have a criminal investigation. So it's usually not the solution to keeping people safe. And this is where it sounds ironic, but the police don't focus on keeping us safe. They're not going to, do a threat assessment. They're not going to post someone outside of your house or let you work from home or whatever to keep you safe. And that's unfortunately one of the big gaps that the police have. They don't really do proper threat assessment, and they don't really know how to manage threatening situations for the average person.
I mean, that said, though, we're talking about doing we could do an assessment, but there's only a certain amount of value in the assessment. What are the tools at one's disposal to be able to take action post an assessment that acknowledges that there's a problem?
Yeah. So again, there were two guys who were caught. So we don't even know if the guy who sent those threatening messages were Kekana or was it Sitole, the first thing. So yes, they've done a proper investigation to at least identify that. I'm not saying they would be pointless. It would be useful, but that isn't necessarily solving your threat problem. No. And we would typically look at the types of messages sent, how often are they sent, what do they actually say, the content of the actual threat, etc. From a protection point of view, we could do things like letting the person work from home for an extended period of time, letting them work from Parkview Police Station, which is, a couple kilometers away from here, until we kind of figure out what's going on. But she clearly didn't feel safe, and there really wasn't any investigation done. And like I said, the police actually just don't do threat assessments. It's just not something they do. And the local police detective who's in charge of this case, he's not going to be a threat assessor. So, yeah, I even remember when I was getting threats for some of the cases I worked on, I told my general, he's like, "Yeah, but you're a policeman. That's why we give you a gun." It's like, no. Yeah. And you just carry on. Yeah.
When it comes to threat assessment in the workplace, what is most typical? Where do the threats typically come from? Is it inter-employees or is it outside threats typically? What is kind of more commonplace here?
Yeah. So the two most common in terms of workplace violence would be current or former employees. We have that here. He was just dismissed. And domestic violence are all interesting things. So you'll have the boyfriend of someone coming to the place of work and causing trouble or sending threatening messages or trying to slander the name of this employee of his ex-girlfriend to her boss. So those are the two. Domestic violence that plays out in the workplace, because that's often the only place he knows where that his ex-girlfriend is now, because he knows that she has to go to work every day. or it's a great way to mess people's life up. If you go to their place of work and start causing a scene, and then typically the managers are like, get your boyfriend out of here, and almost like secondarily punish the victim. But yeah, current or former ex-employees and domestic violence is the two biggest problematic situations. Not so much customers, of course, yes, but not as many as you might think in terms of the most frequent types of people causing problems in a workplace.
And what kind of organizations kind of provide threat assessment type facilities to their employees? Is this becoming more and more commonplace, especially in a country like South Africa, where maybe we can't rely on the police, but you're employed and you're in a corporate environment. There's a certain amount that your employer can do to assist in that situation if the will is there.
Yeah, I mean, the Occupational Health and Safety Act speaks about a safe environment and taking steps to prevent something from happening. Now, we typically think of occupational health and safety as a hard hat and protective glasses and steel-tipped shoes if you're working with heavy things. But actually, the Act also implies other forms of safety towards your health, which is like getting assaulted in the workplace. So overseas, like in Canada and the United States, the biggest driver and the biggest laws that govern workplace violence are actually in their Occupational Health and Safety Act. But our occupational health and safety people just haven't bought into it. They just think that's not our problem, that's a security problem.
Okay.
But there are things like the Department of Labor had this protection from harassment guidelines, and they define harassment to include workplace violence and threats. But still, people just don't really kind of do anything about it. There's the common law duty of care towards your employees. But unfortunately, we're going to have a US-style workplace mass shooting before the conversation is going to start working towards we need to have something in place. So you've started to see some companies, and that's why we started the African Association of Threat Assessment Professionals, AFATAP.Africa, if you want to go look it up. And that's specifically aimed at trying to develop a professional threat assessment for the workplace environment, for the education environment, for the counterterrorism environment, for terrorism threats, and sort of the domestic violence kind of leg. That's the 4 legs of threat assessment, to try and get companies to start looking into this. So you are seeing companies like ABSA has got a very advanced workplace violence threat assessment program. They're the leaders in the country, in my opinion. I helped them develop that program.
I was about to say, that's because you did it.
Yeah, and a few other companies that were starting to look at, hey, we need to have some system in place, because just throwing up security is not a very good solution. We need to understand, do we need security? Do we need more security? Do we need less security? When do we downgrade our security? When do we upgrade our security? And is security the right response? If you have a mentally ill person who's making threats towards a company, then getting them arrested is not going to be the solution to your problem. Getting them into mental health treatment is. So an intelligent analysis of what you're dealing with, and then an intelligent response to mitigate it so that it doesn't happen. Like I said, getting people arrested can be an aggravating factor. Like domestic violence victims get this all the time. When people say, why didn't you go and get a protection order? I don't understand why you didn't go to the cops and just open up a criminal case. Because they will tell you, because this guy will kill me if I do that. So they understand very well that taking the logical steps of protection orders and criminal cases actually increase danger. And they're absolutely correct. Now, that doesn't mean we don't do those steps if we feel they're necessary, but those are not safety solutions. We still have to look at how we're going to keep you safe in that time period if we feel that the criminal case or the protection order is a requirement.
Okay. What you start to think about is Tom Cruise in that movie where he does pre-crime, where there's those psychics who lie in the pool, the precogs. They lie in the pool and they predict what crimes are going to happen, and then Tom goes out and stops crime happening before it does. My question is this: where are we going? Are we on a path towards kind of preventative policing, just kind of globally, at the kind of cutting edge of policing? How much are we looking into policing becoming more preventative, that we can go, okay, we're seeing signs. We've got so much digital environment to assess these days, conversations that are happening, habits that are happening, searches on Google that people are potentially doing, all that starts to tell a story. Then we've got AI that, can supercomputer put a whole ton of information together and assess and evaluate. Where is the kind of cutting edge of this, Gerard?
So in my world, which is threat assessment, this is all I do now. it's always
This is why
about
Canada
picking
stole
up
you
the-
from us.
Yeah. It's always about picking up as early as possible problematic behavior. So in other words, we need to train people. We need to tell people what they must look out for, what they must bring to our attention, because we always say that every targeted violence incident like this has a precursor. Nobody just randomly walks into work one day and shoots a bunch of people. There will be a history to it. There might be verbalizations. And I think about up to 31% of active shooter cases, people beforehand knew, sometimes very directly, what the person was planning and what they were going to do. And we saw that very nicely with the Monet Haramse Krugersdorp school shooter case. He was planning with his buddies that he was going to do this. The other kids just thought he was joking. We saw that in this list. I mentioned the Primrose school shooting last year. The person had a list. They had a WhatsApp group that they were discussing shooting people. So there's often not, hindsight is 50-50, 20-20, whatever it is, kind of very clear pre-incident warning signs. So you'll see this in these American shooters where people would have posted on the internet, I'm going to take my AR-15 tomorrow to school and shoot some people.
Yeah.
That's not ambiguous. So it's trying to teach people as early as possible to pick up concerning behavior long before it becomes a huge problem, because small problems have small solutions. And then you deviate the person off that pathway to violence. So we typically say that for your targeted violence, which this is a case of, it starts with your grievance, something I'm unhappy about. Could be an electricity bill that's 10 times higher than normal. It could be because I was dismissed, as in this case. Then the person starts to have violent thoughts as a solution. And after a while, the violent thoughts are the only ones left, because maybe you've tried this, you've tried that, the sort of civilly appropriate, socially appropriate solutions, and they didn't work. Now you have your violence left over as your option. Now you have to sort of do your research. How would I do this? Where would I get a firearm? Where is the mayor of the city that I can go and shoot him one day? Then you have to go prep. You have to get the gun. You have to maybe go practice with the gun. You have to go then check out where his office is to see if there's security. So there's these typical steps that people walk down on that pathway to targeted violence. And often people are aware of what's going on, but they don't take it seriously. They don't know who to tell. They think it's a joke, etc. So there are the warning signs. And what we try to do with these scenarios with companies is to set up a system where they hear about things as early as possible. You encourage your employees, hey, if you're concerned about something, come and tell us now. And let's step in. And it's not always step in to punish the person if it's a fellow employee. It's sometimes step in so we can get this person back onto a healthy pathway. So if you're doing your threat assessment and threat management properly, it's actually helpful for both parties, because the problematic person of interest who might one day do something bad, you've helped them not do something bad, which is good for them. And you've also, of course, in that process, helped people not become victims of whether it's verbal abuse or physical abuse or whatever kind of abuse might be. So done properly, it's parallel to any disciplinary or criminal procedures, but you're actually helping people not do something. You're intervening as early as possible when things are much easier to resolve instead of wait. Because as I said, how often have we heard after the fact, people come out and say, oh yeah, he was telling us he's going to do this. And then, oh yeah, we found these Facebook posts, or all this information comes out afterwards. Like, why the hell didn't we know about it beforehand? And it's the same in South Africa.
Yes. It seems like mental, policing, we're brought up with kind of a cops and robbers mentality towards policing, isn't it? The bad guys arrive in a mask, and then the cops jump out from behind the wall with a shoot 'em, and there's a shoot 'em up and blah, blah, blah. But it definitely seems like one of the, if you look at the bigger picture of policing, and mental health being a major component in that, is that, the more sophisticated your society's ability to deal with mental health issues become, then very directly that's likely to have an effect on, the overall issues of crime in that society. Would that be a fair comment?
Yeah, look, there's always emotions involved. I mean, being pissed off and angry can cause you to go and assault someone and shoot someone. Of course, mental health issues can be a direct cause. Like if you are having hallucinations and delusions, you think that people are out to get you, you think that your boss is targeting you because of your delusional thinking and the voices speaking to you, and you go and assault your boss or stab them. Obviously, your mental illness is directly linked to that. But just having mental health issues even if it's a workplace problem like Kekana had, but maybe he has depression or bipolar in the background, that's just not helpful. It's destabilizing. It's drawing away his psychological strength to deal with that problem. And if he had financial problems, that's another thing that saps your strength. So these things aren't causal reasons, but they're things that take away your ability to cope properly. So we also saw that in COVID, where many of us, we didn't have income, because we're socially isolated, we might have been a bit depressed. You couldn't get your cigarettes and your alcohol as easily, so you're not, though you've got those cravings. Those are not helpful for people's psychological state of mind and ability to deal with things. So when we do a threat assessment, we're trying to look at all those things. Are these evidence-based associated factors present or not, and how are they influencing this person? Now, if we look at Kekana, he was 38 years old at the time of the shooting, so he wasn't a youngster. He was married with 2 children, so he had that stability factor. He lived in subsidized housing, which of course he's going to lose once he's out of SAPS. He'd been in the SAPS for about 9 years up until that point in time. So not really, anything that was a major standout. But I guess for him it was, I've lost my job, I'm going to lose everything now. I don't know if his wife was, if he was the sole breadwinner, of course, then him losing his job impacts him, his wife, his 2 kids. He's going to lose his subsidized housing. And he might and who knows if he had depression on the side, substance issues. It was just too much for him to deal with. So, and sadly, when these cases happen, the police, because we know who did what, there's nobody to prosecute, it's going to go for an inquest in front of a magistrate who will deem it to be a murder-suicide, and that's it. There's not this in-depth analysis of the case. And that was, for me, what was always sad, is that we don't have sometimes the deep answers that we really wanted. Like, what was Kekana's issue? Did he have depression? Did he have substance issues? The contributory factors, because from a policing point of view, those are irrelevant to proving A did this to B. So that's often why we don't, as society, get the answers to this, because for the cops, it's like, there's not really anything to investigate here. We know he did this. He's dead. So we're not going to prosecute anybody, and this will go off to an inquest magistrate eventually.
So would there have been any observable changes or improvements, within SAPS regarding threat assessment and internal, employee safety protocols as a result of this case?
We don't change in South Africa. Just like with the Primrose shooting I mentioned last year, it was in February, just like the Morne Arms sword killing in Krugersdorp all those years ago, nothing changes. Because in South Africa, we look at this and go, oh, that was a very interesting once-off unique event, and we move on. We don't develop systems. We don't change very easily. We don't realize we need to do something different. So sadly, no. Even in companies where there's been workplace violence tragedies, I can tell you now, those companies haven't got a threat assessment capability. They haven't trained people to do things better. We just don't do that as South Africans. I think crime overwhelmed, etc. So sadly, no. SAPS wouldn't have changed. The only people in SAPS who are trained as threat assessors would be some of the people who were left in my old unit, because we had really amazing training back in the sort of 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013 years, when there was a lot of money for training. We had literally world leaders come out to South Africa and train us in threat assessment. A lot of those people have left our unit. A couple of them are there. No. Interesting other fact, sorry, I want to comment on, Paul, about Kekana, is that they actually at the autopsy did a blood alcohol analysis, and he had 0 alcohol in his blood. So interesting. He wasn't pissed when he did this, which is common. Okay. People do get a bit of Dutch courage. He was completely sober. Now, could he have been on other drugs? I don't think they would have looked at that necessarily.
He did. He specifically targeted these folks. There was a question that came up, and I just wanted to just reference it here, and that was, let me just find it. Sorry, guys. Let me just find the question here. I had it. Sorry, Jared. Oh, here we go. From Leslie. Were the 2 deceased involved in the disciplinary hearings? So were they very specifically his targets because of their involvement?
So, NAIDU definitely was managing the disciplinary, because she was the head of HR. I don't know whether Colonel Mkhize would have had to do anything. I'm actually opening up quickly the disciplinary report. I want to see whether Mkhize signed this. She might have just had to sign off the final report. No. Confirmation disciplinary sanctions. No, I don't see Mkhize's signature. But probably he would have seen her as the head of the station as someone who could have influenced this process or stopped it.
Okay.
And I know actually as she was being shot, she was saying to him, but you can appeal. I mean, imagine that. Some guy's firing bullets at you and you're saying, you can appeal, you can appeal. I mean, the poor lady must have been absolutely terrified.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't see her signature on any of these final documents, but definitely NAIDU would have been coordinating the actual disciplinary process. So, but I think you just would have seen her, Mkhize, as the head of the station. You know, you could have intervened, you could have stopped this as a station commissioner, which I don't really know if she could have.
Do we know if she went back to the police after this?
It's a good question. I remember asking this and I can't recall what the answer was. And she survived, thankfully.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's a good question.
Okay. All right. So not much came of it, except the fact that we can now discuss it and kind of unpack it for what it is. When it comes to threat assessment in this kind of environment, when you're kind of giving advising companies or giving kind of training on threat assessment in the workplace, are there some kind of key things that you drive home as kind of the important takeaways? Are there like is there the 5-step plan to being a good threat assessor, as an individual?
Obviously get some good training because, your gut view on what is dangerous and what is not is the worst way to try and, there's actually research that's shown among psychologists and psychiatrists, so we all understand human behavior, not really, that their ability to predict violence risk is about 51% accurate. So you may as well flip a coin.
Yeah.
Once you train people, whether it's psychologists, and a lot of threat assessors are not psychologists, that's one thing you have to understand. The majority of threat assessors are security personnel, HR personnel, other people who have been trained using evidence-based tools to assess risk. And then they can do it quite well if they have the adequate information and they're using proper tools like the HCR20, which is actually one I have on my table right now, which we use for assessing violence risk. Or if you're dealing with domestic violence risk, you've got, something like this, the SARA version 3, which is specifically for spousal assault. And these are internationally used throughout the world. I think there's like 35 countries. It's been translated into 20 languages. Here's one for stalking, the most widely used guideline for assessing stalking. So once you start to use those and you've got good information, you can do a very adequate assessment of the concerns, but also these things help you structure how we're going to mitigate that. So training is essential, not your gut feeling. It doesn't matter whether you're a policeman or a psychologist. If you haven't been trained in threat assessment, you haven't been trained in threat assessment. And then, of course, a system in place for finding out about things in their earliest phases, not right at the last moment when the blood is flying. That doesn't help you to find out about problematic behavior because we want to prevent violence, not react to it.
Absolutely. Guys, if you're a fan of true crime on the channel and if you enjoy the content that we put together here, please do subscribe right now. Hitting the bell icon also ensures that you get notified every time we drop a new episode, so you never miss out on I find them to be extremely interesting conversations. We are, of course, on a mission to get to let me see here. I want to bring up our live subscriber count. We're on a mission to get to 50,000 subscribers, guys. We're currently on, there we are, 24,899. We love the support. We appreciate you all. Like I say, if you'd like to join the community, then do so. Subscribe now. It's simple to do. And then also this week, if you'd like to contribute to the show and help us to make this effort of creating great crime content sustainable, you can buy us a coffee. Just scan the QR code, or the link is in the description below. There we go. Look, genuine Canadian coffee. You can pop across the border and get some original Starbucks from where you are, can't you, Gerard?
In and out.
Okay, so that's the case. What are the kind of takeouts from this then, Gerard? Generally speaking, I want us to talk a little bit about mass shooting and some of the preventative measures around that. You sent an interesting clip through today that we're going to look at and talk about. But let's first kind of conclude our conversation on the Rosebank. The last thing I wanted to ask you is, who are the kind of key people in an organization that would most worthwhile to provide this kind of training to? Your head of HR, I would imagine.
Absolutely. So in a corporate setting, absolutely head of HR, because often problematic behavior between employees often goes into the disciplinary avenue or the ethics investigation. So your HR people, your ethics investigators might be the first ones to come across concerning behavior. That should kick off parallel to that a risk assessment to see what we have to be careful about in terms of this. What could this person do in the future? So yeah, security, HR, ethics officers, and maybe legal, because sometimes things land up on the lawyer's table. But that's usually if it's an external problematic person towards like a customer who's threatening the company, the legal people often. So you need to have that multidisciplinary team of all of those people. And then maybe if you've got employee health and wellness as part of that, they can be part of it. And of course, then you're professionally trained, either internal, external consultants that you can phone to say, hey, we've got this case. Can you jump on the call with us? And a lot of stuff we do with Zoom calls. And I'll jump in with ABSA and I'll give my thoughts on the case. We'll discuss it, we'll brainstorm it, and we'll plot a way forward.
Are you still dealing with clients this side of the pond kind of thing?
Yeah, I had one I had one on Friday. A guy also used to work for a company many years ago, tried to come back, can I please get a job? And then suddenly starts sending these threatening, aggressive, angry emails to the CEO of the company. And they said, like, hey, do we have to worry about this? What's the best way forward? In that particular case, we said, don't do anything right now. There's no risk of violence. The person wants to go to court or wants to try this. Those are socially acceptable mechanisms. Let's monitor it and let's see if he just sort of cools off and moves on. Because the minute you start to do things like protection order applications, civil cases, criminal cases, you're locking yourself into an interaction with someone where you actually want to be disengaging from someone. So sometimes the solutions might sound counterintuitive to people who don't kind of know about threat assessment and threat management.
Big thank you to Katzen and to Shelley. We appreciate you. Last question before we move on to this our mass shooting clip here, and you can set the scene for that. What is the threat assessment environment like that you've stepped into now? I mean, what for you as a evolving professional in this space was attractive to you, and how do your challenges in the environment you find yourself in now differ from where you've come? And is there any insight between that you're starting to kind of to figure your way through?
The company I work for is called Protect International. Based in Canada, and these manuals that I just showed you now, like the HR20, they developed all of these. And so they developed some of the most widely used risk assessment, threat assessment tools across the globe. So it's for normal violence, sexual violence, stalking, honor-based violence, self-directed violence, sexual violence, did I say that? What else have they got? Group violence, etc. And these are used by prison services to corporates, you name it, for assessing various types of violence risk. So it's quite nice to be in a company that develops these things and updates them all the time. We obviously still consult on cases here in Canada, a lot of higher education, universities, they have threat assessment teams. So they're often phoning us for a consultation on a case that they're dealing with. And of course, going around the globe, training people to actually use these instruments. So for me, it's quite a nice forward step in my own professional development. And of course, the people I'm working with, like Dr. Stephen Hart, are like legends in the world of threat assessment. Kevin Douglas, who's linked to the company, Randy Kropp. These are all names that if you sort of know the threat assessment, risk assessment literature, are names that pop up very, very regularly. So it's really great for me to be working with people who are incredibly knowledgeable that I can kind of grow a bit and develop, which I kind of felt was stagnating for me back home.
Is this why Canadians are renowned for being so nice? Because they catch all the bad eggs early?
Could be.
Hey?
Yeah.
Seems like that's the case. Oh, say, Kay, set the scene for the clip you sent through to us earlier that we're going to be looking at. And let's talk about that. Let's take the conversation there.
So I mentioned a lot about how there's always warning signs before the incident because people go through this pathway to acting out their violent behavior in targeted violent cases. Not the guy walking down the street who bumps into someone and punches him. We're talking about people who want to exhibit violence towards a particular person, a group, or an organization. So after the Sandy Hook shooting, which took place many years ago in the United States, which is a very tragic shooting at, I think, if I recall correctly, a primary school or elementary school, the Sandy Hook Promise, which is an NGO that started up, and if you go onto YouTube and Google Sandy Hook Promises, you'll find all of these videos that are kind of educational, instructional adverts. So they're like a minute long, 2 minutes long, that they will show on TV, etc. And I use a lot of their videos in my training on threat assessment. And this one for me just encompasses what is out there that we don't react to, and why are we only hearing about these things after the tragedy. And this is really what this particular video is about. Like I said, you can go onto the Sandy Hook Promise webpage or YouTube, and you'll find a lot more of really impactful types of videos of like this. So I think this one is about 1.5 minutes long, but it kind of, for me, sums up the end of like how we could actually prevent these things.
And then we say roll tape.
I'm here at the scene of tomorrow's shooting, where a 15-year-old will kill 4 children, 2 adults, and then turn the gun on himself.
When the shooting starts happening tomorrow, first I'll probably just think it's firecrackers or a car backfiring or something.
He told some of us that his dad kept the gun in his closet, and he always talked about using it on, you know, the people that bullied him. Tomorrow I'll probably say that I wish I told someone.
You know, after the shooting, we're going to feel pretty bad about picking on him, but until then, we'll probably just keep doing it because he's pretty weird.
Tomorrow I'll probably point out that something has seemed off with him since the beginning of the school year.
And I'm now joined by the officers who will be the first responders tomorrow. What additional details can you share with us?
Well, someone is expected to tell us after the shooting that the shooter has been posting on social media about doing this for weeks.
So how will you explain the shooting to your daughter?
Actually, I won't get to explain it to her because she won't make it.
This is Christine Lynn, reporting from the scene of another shooting we'll say we never saw coming.
Sure.
It's really impactful. I mean, and other videos are just as, like, you just want to, it like hits you. But it's exactly the point. There's always warning signs.
Yeah.
Family, friends, employees, but we don't know what they are. We don't take it seriously. We don't know who to tell, or we tell people that don't know what to do with that information. But it's there. Yeah. And it can be very helpful to prevent somebody from doing clearly somebody who is desperately needing psychological input and assistance to help them not do something very bad and tragic. There's no loser in that situation by reacting.
Yeah, a very striking way to illustrate, especially the mom. That little moment with the mom with the daughter sitting there on the swing set. Awesome. Great stuff, Gerard. Thank you. So, yeah, I mean, guys, I don't know. We haven't, folks haven't been too busy in the chat tonight. So we said thanks for a couple of our super stickers. But yeah, if you have any final questions, now would be the time to drop those to us. Gerard, I mean, that's kind of it for tonight's show. We're going to be working to keep it to a nice tight hour from now on, because the show does now land in the middle of your threat assessment day. So we're going to try and keep it a little bit tighter. And also, I think a tight hour is the way to go anyway. Yeah, just final thoughts on the Rosebank shooting case. And, you know, is there anything that, you know, other than one of the you know, victims surviving, which is obviously, you know, thank goodness for that. But, you know, what are the positives? Are there any positives out of this? Were there any positive outcomes from this?
To be honest, I don't know if there were. For me, positive outcome would be that something changed in how we look at things, how we deal with things. And sadly, I don't think anything changed, like I said earlier. But I just want to end up by saying, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, the whole concept of threat assessment and prevention, as I said, we started up the African Association of Threat Assessment Professionals, AFATAP, AFATAP, which is one of 6 organizations across the globe. We cover the African section of it. And we have, if you go onto our website, we have webinars every 3 weeks. So this Thursday, there's a webinar on the role of memes in promoting violent behavior. And that's a webinar. It's $200 if you're not an FTAP member. And we have a conference in November in Johannesburg about these issues. And actually on top of that is some training. The conference is 2 days, the Monday and Tuesday. Then the Wednesday and Thursday is training by an ex-FBI threat assessor on how to do threat assessment. And that's open to pretty much anybody. You don't have to come to the conference to come to the training, but we'd love it if you did. And then on the Friday is the one-day training on insider threats. So that, there is stuff happening. If this is interesting to you, you want to learn more about it, either the webinars that we have, like I said, the whole webinar schedule is on our website for this year, or the conference and the training. So those are opportunities where people can learn more about this and get some basic training.
If you send me through the relevant links there, Gerard, I'll add them into the episode description underneath down here, okay, for folks that catch the episode on the repeat, okay. So send me that through, and the relevant links will be sitting right there for you folks. Gerard, thank you very much. So we're going to be, just before we wrap things up completely, I just wanted to say a few things. First of all, please, like I've said before, please do subscribe, become a member, etc. You can buy us a coffee. Let's put up the QR code there if you'd like to contribute to the show. If you've got any ideas for future episodes, or any comments or questions, or any suggestions, or if you'd like to get involved in the effort that we are all enjoying building our true crime platform here, you can email us at profilerafricainfo@gmail.com. Gerard, this week we're going to be playing the episode of South African Serial covering the Lee Matthews kidnapping and murder. And this is a case you've been quite involved in, and it's a case that we will talk about on the live in the near future. Especially, I think we'll give you a couple of weeks to watch the episode, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about it in a few weeks' time. But that was a case you were very involved in. And just before I play a little clip to round off the show from the episode, just kind of set the scene there, Gerard. I mean, just any thoughts to set the ball rolling on the Lee Matthews episode. I'm going to be posting the episode immediately after the live stream here. It'll be available to channel members, and then it will be live for everyone 8 o'clock Thursday morning. So just introduce the Lee Matthews story for us, Gerard.
Yeah, essentially, I'm trying to think if it was 2003 or 2004, but essentially, Lee Matthews gets kidnapped from the Bond University, which was there in Sandton. I think it's now Varsity College Sandton is the same campus. It's on the eve of her 21st birthday. She gets kidnapped, leaving the varsity, and her father gets a phone call demanding, I think, 350,000 rand. Long story short, they get the police involved. They do a physical drop-off along the N1 highway, but Lee is not released. And about 2 weeks later, her body is found in Walkerville, south of Johannesburg, in the open veld, gunshot wounds. Long story short, they also felt that the body was perhaps, that wasn't the scene where the shooting took place, that it was staged, and the theory that she had been kept somewhere such as a cold storage facility. Eventually, Pete Bielefeld takes over the case and arrests Donovan Moodley, who then pleads guilty. He then spent numerous years trying to unguilty himself by various legal applications, but we'll get into that. And he's currently up for parole.
So if you're a channel member, you'll be able to watch that in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So after the show, I will make sure that it goes live for our channel members. Otherwise, we will definitely save a conversation on this, because it'll be nice to talk about kind of current realities around the case. I know that there are, like you say, parole hearings there's been issues around that, and it's a case that you've stayed relatively close to because you have a strong relationship there with the Matthews family, and we'll get a bit of insight into that as well. Lee Matthews' father does feature in the documentary, so you can really get a sense of, his involvement in the story in his own words, and I think quite a powerful episode, and hopefully one that you'll enjoy. So, when I say enjoy, from a, you know what I mean. Anyway, thanks, Gerard. appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your lengthy day there in Canada. Like I say, guys, appreciate you. Thanks for watching the show as always. The Lee Matthews episode will be available to members shortly, and we're just going to leave you with a little clip from the intro, and we will see you again next week right here on Profiler Africa, hopefully your favorite true crime channel. And before we go, as I always say, Gerard, in Canada there, you know what you need to make sure you do? Trust nobody. Don't trust those Canadians. Trust no one.
Lee would not have given him a lift if she had one single element of doubt about him.
Initially, Mrs. Matthews thought it was a joke.
So I dropped the money. I got a bang on the back of my car. And from that moment, when the newspapers hit the ground the Sunday morning, my telephone was an absolute nightmare.
And then the waiting starts.
12 days at home. 12 days at home.
We got information about a body that had been found.
What we found was really disturbing. The left hand was mummified.
I am a human being and I kill human beings.
Before I knew it, I'd fired 4 shots at the door. I kept on shouting for Eva to phone the police.
Tests are underway to determine if a serial killer is on the loose in Centurion, Pretoria.
The dead won't bother you. It's the living you gotta worry about.